Welcome back to the channel, everybody. This is the Minnesota Twins franchise, now on MLB The Show 19. No longer on 18, it's now the third game that I've brought this franchise to. And we are going to continue the series beyond our World Series win to finish last season, because I still am interested in the journey for many of the young players on this team, and to see if the Twins can sustain this level of greatness. The offseason for this latest year was streamed last weekend. It's on the channel if you wish to watch it, but today I'm going to recap all the important information from the offseason. The first priority in this offseason was going to be to take care of Miguel Sano's contract situation. We had plenty of cash flow. I'm sure our budget has gone way up since the beginning of the series due to our success. We can afford to pay a lot of players pretty big contracts. We have all this flexibility, even with players like Paul Goldschmidt, Dallas Keuchel, and Yasiel Puig under contract. I also had to take care of the entire coaching staff. Everybody's deal was expiring. We get to the offseason and see the retirement. Our only retirement was Eli Guzman. I thought we'd see Nelson Cruz retire, but no. He still wants to continue playing. We see Robinson Cano retires, and a player I did not want to see retire, Justin Verlander. Despite his regression, he was still being paid like a high-end ace, over $20 million a season, and Detroit now gets a lot of flexibility with him retiring. Robinson Cano is the only Hall of Fame inductee from this offseason. I'm not going to go through all the coaching staff right now. It took a while to finalize, but we were able to keep our manager, Henry Wright, on a new contract, and we have a fair amount of new coaches at the same time who are all pretty good. So let's get to the players' side of everything. When it came to exclusive negotiations, I was a little confused because I expected to see Miguel Sano there. I thought he was past his final year of arbitration, but according to this now, he still had 2021 for arbitration. So that made things a little bit easier, but I still wanted to take care of the long-term deal. Especially after the last 2 years, the number's only going to go up from here. So as far as these 5 players are concerned, the only one I really wanted to keep was Aaron Loup. We need that lefty in the bullpen. I was a lot more comfortable trying to replace the other free agents, including Nelson Cruz. Tony Watson then exercised his option to remain a Twin, and here were some of the large contracts given out in this part of the offseason: Taijuan Walker, Sonny Gray, and Danny Salazar. Then it was on to salary arbitration and the tender contracts, and I was happy to see that Sano and Conforto were still available for arbitration. I wasn't sure if there was an issue moving from MLB 18 to 19, where maybe it didn't add a year, or subtract a year rather, from their free agent time, but regardless, this is what we have to work with. I then set up the 40-man roster and took a look at some players for the future, including Breivik Valera, who will get a chance in spring training. And then to Miguel Sano, 27 years old. I could offer arbitration, or I could offer him the long-term contract I wanted to, and have an idea of our future cash flow without having to pay more than we already have to. I thought 5 years, $90 million was really fair. I expected to pay more, so I was very happy with that. And then I offered arbitration to the rest of the players eligible, and most of these numbers were very close to the recommended amounts in their contract negotiation screen. I'm not going to go through all the tender contracts. Most of these are very straightforward. You just give them the renewable rate and you move on. There were a few players though that I didn't offer to, mostly older players that still wanted like $500,000 or an amount that I just didn't want to pay because I didn't see their path to the major league roster. So there were some players that I am moving on from and I have replaced now going into this next season. But there are definitely some players I'm excited about, like Carmen Ojeda, Ty Gonzalez, when it comes to the future. Matt Bowman was one of the players that I decided not to keep just because I did want to save some money for some of these minor league spots. Darren Blum was another one of those players. So we'll move on from that. Here were players we could lose in the Rule 5 draft, which I wasn't really concerned about. I've done a much better job recently handling the 40-man roster. The Rays signed Ken Giles to a pretty sizable deal for the 30-year-old pitcher. And we see Miguel Sano signs his 5-year, $90 million contract. I really think we have a great deal here, and I'm glad we gave him the 5-year deal now rather than later. Not only do we give him that deal, but we made it front-loaded so it gets easier to handle as he ages. I also threw a player option in there, so expect him to decline it if we make it that far. I don't think he'll play out the last year if his salary is that low. On to free agency. Look what could happen here. Mookie Betts interest from the Yankees. It was odd to see the Boston Red Sox not try to keep Mookie Betts. Instead, they were negotiating with George Springer, who was not on their team and older. So it looked like that Mookie Betts could be headed to a new city. And overall, there weren't many players in free agency that I wanted to sign. Backup catcher was something I thought about. JT Realmuto was available, but he's not the same player that he's turned into in real life. Rather, I wanted to find more left-handed pitching. Brad Hand from Minnesota, spent some time in Boston, had some good years. So given our lack of depth in the bullpen, I wanted to add some lefties. Brad Hand got the offer. And then I thought about the utility player I wanted on the team. Marwin Gonzalez can certainly fit that role on a short-term contract anyway, and he hits pretty well for a guy coming off the bench, which he would in our situation. I found a catcher here, rather the chat did really. Chet Valenzuela with a potential 67 overall. Not a bad minor league player to go and sign, but he's a very defensive catcher with some pop, but low contact ratings. One thing I wanted to at least explore in the offseason was a Charlie Blackmon trade as he continues to age and still has a few years under contract. He was huge for us in the postseason, and he's been really good in his time so far in Minnesota. His numbers did drop a little bit this past year, so I wanted to see what offers there were, but most of them weren't that good. The Red Sox then give the big 5-year deal to George Springer, meaning they have moved on from Mookie Betts. And everybody in the chat, it seemed, wanted me to go and try to bring Betts to Minnesota. I really didn't want to go 5 years, $120 million, though. I didn't think we had that kind of flexibility. Marcus Stroman signs a nice deal to go to the Nationals. I thought about trading for him a few years ago in the series. Overall, our projected cash flow was still in a really good spot, and we only had a handful of arbitration salaries left to add on to the books, and most of them weren't going to be huge deals anyway. But I made all these offers and decided I would at least explore the possibility of signing Mookie Betts, but not to the kind of deal he was looking for. 2-year deal, $45 million with a player option. I like these kind of deals. Short term, give the flexibility to the player, and see what happens. The Blue Jays trade for Michael Wacha from the White Sox. Interesting deal. And then we see the move of the offseason. The Minnesota Twins do add Mookie Betts on a very short-term deal. We just increased the average money per year, of course. And with Betts signing, that opened the door for Charlie Blackmon to be traded. We had the room financially to make an upgrade, so I had to at least try. And then I tried to do more stuff here with the Trade Finder, which I don't normally like the deals it recommends. Teams tend to throw 2-3 players into a deal to increase the value when really you're looking for one player that can make a big difference. So I went manual. And I thought Miguel Diaz here from the Padres would be a really good player to add. I couldn't trade for him at this time because he wasn't actually under contract, but was still somebody they were trying to keep. So I had to move on a little bit, and we make it to the Rule 5 draft. And normally, nobody would get drafted, or maybe one player, but actually a few go in the first round. And there were a couple good options here. Gleyber Torres, Ronald Acuna, of course. But in a Rule 5 draft, you have to keep that player on your roster, I believe, the entire year, your 25-man roster. I kind of felt like I'd be exploiting the game a little bit, taking somebody like Torres or Acuna. Plus, we have a really good roster anyway. So we move on. We are still in the winter meetings and now make it to the arbitration hearings. And we won a couple of these, lost a couple of them. It only changes the numbers by a little bit, so it's not really a big deal. Alvarez and Reed won theirs, and that brought our cash flow to $625,000 in the green. Not bad. That's a fair amount of flexibility. Alright, we're finally going to change the number for Nick Gordon. I decided that we would stick with 83 all last season, but now he's going to wear number 20, and that wasn't my decision. I forgot what I changed it to, but it was taken, so it moved to 20. We're staying with it. Alright, again, trying to trade Charlie Blackmon. Miguel Diaz was the pitcher I really wanted, but the chat brought up you could go get a lefty, and that was something I definitely wanted. So I went over to the Braves. Sam Freeman, 87 overall pitcher. He is older with a 1-year contract, but that's the kind of player that could make a big difference here in the near future. I was also able to add an outfielder to the deal for our minor league system. Looking back at this trade, I kind of wish I would have traded for Diaz instead, but we needed the lefty help for sure. We still have Luke and Watson. We'll see how they perform this year. I could consider moving Gonzalez to the bullpen, but our roster is basically set now, and in spring training, the goal is going to be to finalize a couple spots and get ourselves a 25-man roster we can try to make another playoff run with. I feel really good about this roster. It only got stronger, I believe, from this offseason. There are some players with negative morale. I know that Ty Gonzalez, I want him to have a chance at being the everyday DH, but I underpaid him a lot for that role. I hope that during the season I can negotiate a new contract. But here are a couple clips from the first spring training game I played. I'm not sure how much I'm going to play, but I do want to get a bit more comfortable with the hitting. There are some changes between MLB 18 and 19, and the hitting just feels a little bit different. I've got to get used to it, but when I got into the game here, I was doing a pretty good job. Got a quick single with Mookie Betts, follow that up with another base hit from Paul Goldschmidt, and then Miguel Sano, able to go right back up the middle, 3 straight hits. Felt pretty good in this game. I'll play some more spring training as much as I feel I need to, and we'll see who can win those final roster spots. There are some young players, though, to definitely keep an eye on. Ty Gonzalez is the player I wanted to replace Nelson Cruz with. He is like a 78 overall player, but that's factoring in fielding and everything else that he doesn't have to do, and he's not that good at. He's a hitter. High contact, high power. So really, when you think about him as a DH, I'd call him more of an 84, 85 overall player. For the utility role, I want to see Breivik Valera take that over. He has 99 plate vision. He's a high contact hitter who can play all sorts of positions. We'll see him in the spring. But here's a good clip of Ty Gonzalez. He has power, and he goes to right center field here for a nice RBI double. And we sim to the end, and the Twins win their first spring training game. Paul Goldschmidt does go yard. Twins win 9-1. Nice way to open spring training. I do plan to do a spring training episode going through some of those key players I mentioned. I want to really focus on them, plus players like Jose Barrios and players trying to make the roster. And we'll see how the Twins look going into year 5 of the series. Thank you all for watching and supporting this series. I've been so happy to see the way that it's grown on many of you over the past few months. I think the series is really fun, and I want to continue doing it. Please leave a like if you're still enjoying the Minnesota Twins franchise, and if you're excited for what is to come. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all again soon. Have a great day.